Trans people everywhere are making headlines. From Jeopardy winner Amy Schneider, the skull-crushing blows by UFC Transwoman Fallon Fox, and Lia Thomas, a record swimmer. Questions emerge. Are trans athletes creating an unfairness for sport athletes? The filthy truth exposed will decide.
Yeah, let's do it. This is going to be a cool one, I think, because I feel like you and I are going to have some disagreements on this, some different angles. Yeah. So not that we're going to fight here on the Filthy Truth Exposed, but it might be a little bit, might be intense, maybe. I think we are going to disagree, so it should be interesting.
I think you're going to be surprised on my take on this, actually. I think
okay, cool.
Really surprised, but we'll see. We'll see if I come out differently than what you thought. So you never know where the filthy Phil is going to come from, you know? So,
yeah, no, I'm excited. But we should first remind everybody that we're on a few different platforms. We're on YouTube, so you can watch us. We can watch us on YouTube. Sometimes we put up pictures and little videos as we're talking. So if we refer to stuff, sometimes you'll see that there on our YouTube channel. And then on BitChute as well, video platform. Rumble is also another video platform we're on. And then if you want to listen to the audio version of the Filthy Truth Exposed, you can check us out on Spotify and iTunes. So you want to start us off, Filthy Phil? With
I'll start you off. Yeah? So the first one is let's talk about the Amy Schneider Jeopardy winner. I'll be honest with you, I didn't see her win because I'm not a huge Jeopardy fan, you know.
She won $1 million.
Yeah, you know, I've watched the things on that show, and they'll ask a question, and I honestly feel stupid. Like I'll be like, "Huh? Like I don't. What are you guys talking about?" Like, anyway, that's regardless though. So I feel like this is the kind of an example where I don't see how trans people would have an advantage or disadvantage. Like, I get the idea where maybe some women would feel like, oh well, you know. They don't see her as a regular woman. But honestly, like, I mean, it's at any point, right? Another woman could come in, whether it's biological woman or a trans woman, and retake the title, right? I mean, ultimately, it doesn't really matter that much. But what is your feeling on that?
Well, I think really the only possible controversy really is just that, are there two different titles? Like, the most winning man and the most winning woman? Shouldn't it just be the most winning person? Like, why does it have to be separated into man and woman? And if it is separated into man and woman, then maybe if they're going to separate it into men and women, I feel like there should be a third category now for transgender people.
Right. Yeah. I kind of hear what you're saying.
But it's really the show, the Jeopardy is really just about the brain. So I feel like it's just one. It should just be.
Yeah.
We shouldn't say who's the most winning woman, who's the most winning man. It should just be who's won the most.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Which is Ken Jennings, I think.
You could just say like who has had the most winnings or something. But don't you see though, like it's kind of natural for our society to put things in categories, and it's always this or that. You know, that's again that whole. How did I talk about it? Dualistic idea, you know, it's this person or that person, you know?
Yeah. Right. So like little girls that are watching it, they're like, oh, they want to watch a woman play, because they can relate to that. So that in that sense, it kind of does make sense that we talk about it in those two categories of men and women. But then when you have a transgender person, then is this transgender person in this case, is she taking away from, from the woman's category in the sense of like, and is she a woman? I mean, we treat her as a woman. She wants to be referred to as a woman, and that's fine, but she's a transgendered woman. So that I feel like that's a separate,
almost like a separate category.
Yeah.
No, I think here's the thing in this specific situation, when it comes to Jeopardy, I'm not too bothered by it. You know what I mean? Like,
me neither.
I kind of feel like, you know, it's because it basically boils down to how smart you are, or I guess how quick you can answer questions, how much information you can regurgitate, you know, or remember. I don't know, you know, how you win at Jeopardy, but it's it's not like men are smarter than women or women are smarter than men. Like it's purely just, you know, I don't know, like intellect, and has nothing to do with any gender doesn't really play a role. So that's why I kind of feel like this one's pretty straightforward. I don't really have a strong opinion on it, I guess.
Well, I mean, to get a little controversial here, you're saying gender doesn't play a role, but it could, because it's the categories that come up. It's the way, the format of the game. And if you look at the history of Jeopardy, and there's not a lot of women that compete on the show. And I don't know if that's because the people that they select, if they go on smarts, or if they're like selecting more men because they want more men on the show or whatever. But when we get into sports, you'll see that there is a difference between men and women.
Oh yeah, of course.
In the physical capabilities for these certain sports. But
I guess what I'm saying is I kind of see it is similar to like poker. You know what I mean? Like, it's more like a poker game. It's more of a game than a sport. Jeopardy is, you know what I mean? Like anybody can pick up 2 cards, right, and decide whether they want to play or not. You know, whether they want to push money into a pot. So it just doesn't take any super strength, anything that would fall into a category of strongly male or strongly female. Now, of course, what you're saying is true too, that you know, other women will look at that and, you know, could be jealous of it, or could be maybe think it's okay, or it's cool, or whatever. There's obviously going to be different viewpoints, the way society views it, but ultimately it just comes down to some people are just smarter than others, and someone else will take the title, I'm sure. You know, she's not the last to take the title. So,
well, I think that's kind of one of the things is like, at this point, she's won so much. There aren't, I'm not sure how close the next woman is, but, I don't know if somebody's going to be able to beat, Amy Schneider on the women's side. Will.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we would hope.
I would hope so. Yeah. I would hope so. So they'd have to maybe have to dumb down the questions, you know?
Oh yeah. There you
That's the way to do it, right?
There you go.
Dumb it down. Hey, I have no chance of being on that show at all. I just let you viewers know that I would completely fail in that department. So let's move on to the next one. I don't mean to brush that one aside, but I just feel like, you know, I don't know, you know. Let's talk about Lia Thomas. So I watched her video and her swimming. She won by like 10 seconds. Was that right?
What I read was 38 seconds in the 1,650 meter freestyle. She won by 38 seconds, more than the second place person.
Right.
Second place woman. Yeah.
She was a previous swimmer as a male.
Right. She was 3 years. She was on the men's team.
Yeah.
I think it was 2019. She switched to the women's team.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, people are really upset. You know, they feel like there's this unfair advantage, you know, having this person that was a male before, you know, and they're going to have stronger body mass. They're going to, you know, and I want to read you the sort of the guidelines. Okay. So it says here, basically the university and the Ivy League are defending her. Okay. This lady. And so what they're saying is that she's following all the NCAA rules, and they admit the fact that she might have some advantages, but they still think she should compete. So the only guideline that they have is that basically she has to be on hormone blocking drugs and estrogen for at least a year.
Right.
So as long as she does that, then that's it.
Right. She's following the rules.
Yeah, she's following the rules.
She's not breaking any of the written rules.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So I want to, some of the different comments I read, I can kind of understand where people are coming from, saying, for instance, that from that record, there's no, I mean, women, it pushes it so far back to where women don't even have a chance to breaking that record. Basically, you have to be a former man to break that record. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point.
So, the thing is that if you really believe in equality, and if you really believe in fairness, there's a tendency to say, well, we shouldn't exclude people from being in this competition. And if we go with the idea that, oh, we should allow them to compete, but they can't compete with the other women, we kind of sound like a little bit like back in history where we kind of did that to other groups of people, where we said it's a sort of separate but equal, right? So like,
no, I
disagree. For instance, black people, for instance, weren't on a team. They weren't on a baseball team. You could have a Negro league, right? You could be somewhere else. You guys, you have
That's
to be
bunched
together with you know what I mean?
That's different. You're separating by race. We're talking about separating by gender. This sport is already separated by gender. They already separate men and women.
Right. No, I understand that. But what all I'm saying is that I'm saying that if you had created if you created a third swimming thing, and it's just say it's for transgendered only, that would be kind of the one of the problems. One of the things too,
I see that as a solution. I see that as a perfect solution.
But you still fall under the category of that you're kind of separating people from. It's a separate but equal thing,
but they're already separated by men and women,
right? But now you're separating into a third category.
What's wrong with that, though?
Well, I personally don't think that's the right solution, but okay. I mean, it's maybe that could work, but I don't think there'd be enough athletes to compete, and I don't know how many people that would watch that. That's the other thing too.
I think people would watch it. To me, it seems fair. I mean, maybe I need to think about it more, but because it seems like you feel like that's the wrong thing to do, to actually have a third class, which would be a transgender competition.
Well, let me just say this. I want to point out that it is creating a definite problem. And when I talk about the fighter, the MMA fighter, it's a real problem, right?
That's a good example.
Issue.
Yeah.
So I'm not
it comes
saying
down to the, yeah,
exactly. So I'm not saying that there's not an unfair advantage here. Definitely this woman can, for instance, gain muscles faster than other women, right? Have that ability, right? And so there's lots of stuff about that. So I think that's one thing. But to separate, let me just read you this thing. Tell me what you think about this. So this is from the ACLU. Okay, so take that with a grain of salt. But okay, gender policing that could subject any woman to invasive tests or accusations of being too masculine or too good at their sports to be a real woman. Furthermore, the myth reinforces the stereotypes that women are weak in need of protection. So, and this relates to whether trans athletes hurt biological women, like for them to be in the sport. Again, I don't actually full agree with the ACLU on this, but I think that you talking about being a libertarian, and testing. This is related to testing, right? You're testing someone whether they're actually female, that and they testing the hormones and stuff like that. You could say that's invasive. You can come from the standpoint from a libertarian point of view and say, wait a second, that's secret information. You don't need to know what's in my pants, right?
Except if it's an official competition, then there's got to be some rules. There's got to, you have to follow these rules. Yeah,
correct.
In this case, Lia Thomas, she's following all the rules.
Yeah. And
it's a sport. It's a game. Just like Amy Schneider, they're not breaking any rules. They're following the rules. They're playing the sport as it's written.
Yeah.
So I think that, like, in this case, Lia Thomas, she's got a new record and she's playing by the rules.
Right.
She has every right to that. But it seems like
other people said too, put an asterisk. That's the other thing people have said too is, you can put down she won the women's record, but you have to add an asterisk saying she's that's the other.
Okay, now I feel like that is separating. I feel like that is inappropriate, to put an asterisk. I say,
Okay.
create a new category, a transgender category. And I feel like that recognizes that there is this different, there's another set of people who want to compete, the transgender people. If she's competing as a woman, then how can transgender people be inspired if she's competing as a woman? Shouldn't she be competing as a transgendered woman to inspire transgender people to live however they want to live?
Yeah, I think you make good points. I'm not fully in disagreeing what you're saying. I think it'd be tough to try to get that set up. You know what I mean? I think just practically. But let me talk about where I think they could do better. I think where there could be some solutions to this problem. You know, I think that the testing needs to be a little bit better. So, for instance, you could say the muscle mass can be measured, and it should just be straight up like, hey, if you got bigger muscle mass, that's kind of under what we'd consider normal. You know what I mean? That you're not allowed to compete in the women's category. You know, I think that's some people would be mad at me for saying that.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right to me either. Yeah,
but I think we need a more stringent test. You know, I think it's important because.
Well, then by that standard, you would exclude Lia Thomas from competing with women.
Yeah, and I guess that's the problem. But again, you know, it's what it is that I want things to be a more fair playing field, and I don't see that as a fair playing field. How could it? How could anyone say that there's fairness in that sport when someone was before a man and could easily build up muscles? The pelvic bone too, just everything about it. It's it changed everything. You know what I mean?
Sports aren't really fair. They're not really about being fair, though. They're about following the rules as they're written.
That's true.
And like you and I mean, we couldn't compete. How's that fair?
No, I wouldn't. No chance. So let's talk about some other evidence. Okay, for this. So one study published in 2020, this is looking at U.S. military personnel who transitioned while in service, found that trans women maintained an edge after 1 year of feminizing hormone therapy. So the research was conducted by Dr. Timothy Roberts. He found that trans women who underwent hormone therapy for 1 year continued to outperform non-transgender women, although the gap largely closed after 2 years. But even then, trans women still ran 12% faster. Pretty much any way you slice it, trans women are going to have strength advantages even after hormone therapy.
Yeah, and why should they even have to take hormones? Why can't somebody be transgendered and not take any hormones? Why do they have to take hormones at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not really sure. So under these controversies, I think here's a couple points that I think that come up. So one is, how do we treat everyone fairly by excluding a trans athletes? So in my example, I gave, you can make the testing more stringent. That would be a form of exclusion. When you say, oh, well, you could add a separate category, that's not really exclusion, but in a way it is, because it's sort of saying they can't be in this category. They're now in a category that, as it is, people not always watch women's sports, right? So you're now putting even more in a category where you may not get as much revenue. There's multiple problems with.
I don't think so. I don't think there's problems with it, because it doesn't matter if people watch it.
Wait a second. Just think about what you're saying, though. If you put someone in the trans category, how many advertisers are going to be on there advertising their?
See, it doesn't matter. That's the market.
But exactly. But what you're
and you know what? Actually,
that would become exclusive.
A lot of they'd get a lot of sponsorship if there's a trans category.
Okay,
don't
maybe
you think?
You're right. Maybe you're right.
Or we're not talking about like. Well, yeah, I was going to say we're not talking about sexual or sexual preferences here. It's not about gay and lesbian or anything like that.
Right. Correct.
It's people saying they want a new category. They're saying I'm a transgendered woman,
Yeah.
To me, it seems it's not an exclusion. It seems like an expansion. It seems like progression to me, to say,
Yeah.
let's make another category, which is a transgender category.
Yeah, that I understand what you're saying. Let's see. What was the other thing that I thought was kind of add to that? So the other thing is how, I think I've mentioned before, how do we determine whether someone's a man or woman? And so I thought in this part we'll talk about sex a little bit, and so how do we determine find out whether it's so clear, what is a man and what is a woman? Because I always thought it was. I always thought it was pretty basic, but it may not be. So let me just read you this. Science says it's impossible for a person to survive without at least one X chromosome. Okay, so the Y chromosome, by sharp contrast, does not contain any genes that are necessary in order for a person to survive. Instead, it only carries genes that cause a person who would otherwise be entirely anatomically female to develop male physical features. So basically, we all start as female, and then eventually it develops one way or another, either male or stays at female, right? There are actually many combinations that are known to occur in humans. Each one produces different physical effects. You can have, for instance, only one complete X chromosome and no Y chromosome. This is known as Turner syndrome. Some people are born with 3 X chromosomes and no Y chromosome. Some people are born with X chromosomes and 1 Y chromosome. This combination of sex chromosomes is known as Klinefelter syndrome. It usually causes people who have it develop unusually small male genitalia and be reproductively infertile. In many cases, they also have a tendency to grow unusually tall, and we have weaker muscles. Some people are born with X chromosome and 2 Y chromosomes. This combination of sex chromosomes is known as XYY syndrome. Most people with the conditions I've described here identify as either male or female. Nonetheless, the mere fact that other combinations of sex chromosomes aside from XX and XY are possible make discussing of biological sex a lot more complicated than most people realize. I kind of touched about that in the last podcast, right?
Dave Chappelle episode, yeah.
Right. So you see that you can have these. Now, it gets even more weird too, because you can also have variations in anatomy. So,
but what you're talking about here is really the outliers. It's sort of it's not common what you're talking about. The variations in anatomy is not common.
Yeah, I don't know how common or not common it is, but the fact that they do exist, I think, is what maybe what we're seeing as far as someone who is someone who becomes transgendered. That maybe that is part of what is happening, is that, and then we get into the areas of where maybe the physical part is there, but somehow the mental part isn't feel the same as the physical. So, but I'm just talking about the physical part. I'm addressing specifically the physical part of it. So, and then the other distinction too is when people say, oh, there's only a man or woman, it ignores the fact that there's what's called intersex. And that's where it's between, the in-between part, right? So for intersex people, some are born with an organ that can either be described as a macroclitoris or a micropenis. The fact is that sex is something you have at birth, and even that is blurry. As for a society as a whole, so I think that we do have a structure, but basically what we're doing what you were saying, which is we kind of have to ignore these variations and form a very kind of rigid thing of there's just male and there's just female.
Because the other option would be everybody competes in swimming, regardless of your gender or your sex or how you identify, and then it's going to be all dudes winning, which is fine, I guess, but that's not what we do anymore. We want everybody to compete, sort of have not to be fair, but to be sort of like, I'm going to compete against somebody who I would like to beat, or who. or who I would like if they beat me. If a woman competes against a man, she doesn't want the man to beat her. But if she competes against a woman, if a woman beats her, she would be happy that a woman beat her. I would be happy that a man beat me, but I wouldn't be happy if a woman beat me. I want to compete against other men.
But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that situation when if someone is sort of in between, or so now we get into this area where it's a little bit gray, and our thinking is instantly like, oh well, then just ignore it. But it is a point. I think it is an important distinction, and that's where kind of Dave Chappelle kind of misses it. Is he just sees it as like, oh, you're just a man or you're just a woman, and I'm giving you the science, a little bit of, it's not the best intelligent science, but
it's the filthy truth,
the filthy truth
of science,
form of science, So, but I see your point that maybe the solution is to have an extra category, and I think it's also a possibility that we should have more stringent testing. That may be a way to solve that problem. But so last thing, let's talk about the MMA fighter. Her name is Fallon Fox. She was the first MMA fighter to come out as transgender. So when this lady competed, she fractured the skull of her opponent back in 2014. So I don't know if that's ever happened. Anyone has ever had their skull fractured. But all I can say is it's pretty devastating. Let's see. Basically, they interviewed the person who had the fractured skull, and she said it was unbelievable. She said she's never had any woman, like have that ability, have that strength. And you can go on Joe Rogan's podcast. He talks about that. And I know people have labeled him as transphobic for saying something that is, to me, very obvious. You know what I mean? So I'm actually on his side on this. Like as much as I believe in equal rights and everything, I think there is something to that. It is incredibly unfair, and it's also dangerous. It's dangerous to have someone who has male strength in that zone where it's MMA. You could easily lose your life. So I that's why, again, I stand by. We need more stringent testing, or I'm down with what you're saying, which is we have to create a separate category.
I think that's a great case for creating a transgender category. I guess you'd have to have two: transgender woman category and a transgender man category.
Sure.
But because if you did the stringent testing, where would Fallon Fox lie then?
It's really simple. I'm not sure exactly how you would determine it, but I'm sure that there's ways that they could figure out a testing that would allow more fairness. For instance, like they could punch a bag, right, and measure how much force is in that punch. And if it's within that line of where most females are, you can say, okay, you can compete, right? Of course, then maybe she doesn't punch as hard, That's the problem.
Yeah.
Of all these things, people can figure out ways to trick the system, right? So I'm not saying that the testing is the advantage, or maybe the thing is we just have to just say, oh well, it is what it is. If you want to be in that sport, you're going to be competing against people that are going to be extremely strong.
I think that's a good point. In this case, the woman who got hit, or she got her skull fractured.
Yeah.
Maybe it's really up to people like her to say, whoa, I'm not going to fight this person because she understands about the boxing. She understands what could actually happen. She could say, oh, I know that this person has way more strength than I'm capable of countering.
Yeah.
So maybe it's her responsibility. Maybe it's the other players' responsibilities. In the swimmer that we were talking about, Lia Thomas, one of the officials resigned. She was a 30-year official, and she just recently resigned because of this specific case where Lia Thomas, the transgender person, beat these other women in swimming. This official, she said, bodies compete against bodies. identities do not compete against identities.
Yeah, it's good point.
So now in your situation where you're talking about Fallon Fox, if she got tested somehow and it was determined, well, you're a transgender male to female, then we're going to have to put you in the male category. Then you just have, men, or a classical version of men beating up now a transgendered woman. And that doesn't seem right either. Like,
true. I think I want to leave the viewers too with an important thing of, this isn't the kind of thing where it's like, oh yeah, we have the solution. This is the way it should be done, right? What we're talking about here is trying to solve, because these are real life problems that people are going through, whether it be the unfairness that people feel, that's real. People really feel that, to the person who's competing and feels, hey, look, I feel like a woman or whatever, and I want to be treated fairly. I want to be able to compete. We're dealing with issues that are really important. And the thing is that we got to have open dialogue. People shouldn't be pointing fingers at each other and saying, oh, well, you're wrong. This is the right way or whatever, and allow people to discuss things and go from there. That's where I stand. So I don't know how you take it, what I just said, but.
Well, I think it's important to note that, out of the controversies that we've heard and read and watched, we don't really hear people saying, oh, that person doesn't have the right to feel however they want to feel. They were born this way and now they feel this way. They want to dress a certain way or have a surgery or take hormones. That's their right. It's their body, their choice. With the discussion that I feel like most people are having is this what we want in our sports and competition? Do we want people to be separated by gender so it's a little bit more fair or not? They're not saying that person doesn't have the right to feel how they want, or that person doesn't have the right to be whatever gender they want. That they're not saying this person doesn't have the right to request that they use a certain pronoun or whatever like that. Everybody has that right and that freedom. And I think that's really important to note, that most people respect other people for just being people.
Right. Yeah. I think I agree with you for the most part. I think the only where I maybe slightly disagree is I feel, for instance, we talk about the whole SJW stuff, is I feel like I understand where they're coming from in a way, but where I draw the line, or where I feel I'm really against some of their views, is that they kind of have this attitude of like, well, if you don't follow the way I think things should be done, you know what I mean?
That's a good point. Yeah.
And now I'm going to cancel you, right? I'm going to go against you. And I don't care what you think. This is the way it is. They strongly feel that the only way that things are is the way they believe. And they want you to follow only what, and that's, what's funny is that they're acting like right wingers. They're actually being authoritarian.
No, they're not acting like right wingers. They're acting authoritarian. Yeah. And they're being intolerant and maybe even hateful. Yeah.
I agree with that. I do think I think of the right being as more authoritarian. So that's why I say that,
Well, if you look at in this case, you're talking about SJWs. I mean, I think most of them would say they're on the left.
Well, but that's my point. So that's the crazy part, is that you can say whatever you want. You can say you're a unicorn. I'm a unicorn. You can identify any way you want, but if you just break it down into, it's a simple question. Are you for freedom of speech? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And if you could say, oh yeah, I am, I'm for freedom of speech. And then you turn around and cancel people, or you turn around and not let people speak. Guess what? You ain't for freedom of speech. You're against it. And so you're not liberal. You're not on the left. I'm sorry. This is the one thing, like it's like the Olympics, where you get to pick and choose. I kick you off the left. You get to go to the right. You know what I mean? That's how that works.
No. Maybe when you're talking about the right, you're talking about the far right. But I think when we talk about SJWs, we're talking about the far left. Like the left can go too far as well, and then they become authoritarian.
That's true. It sort of like comes back around. It loops back around.
Yeah.
Maybe you're
that's
right.
how I see it. Yeah.
That's true. So Anyways, all good points, man. I guess we'll probably wrap it up. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think in the next episode we're going to talk about this Patton Oswalt situation, and this kind of goes into the transgender topic that we're just talking about now, because Dave Chappelle had his special, and he offended, some people were offended about the transgender jokes that he made, and other sorts of jokes that he made. So everybody stay tuned for that episode.
Okay, sounds good. Well, again, I'm Filthy Phil, and you're
Bilbo Baggins, and check us out on Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes, BitChute, and Rumble. We got an audio version and a video version, so check out the Filthy Truth Exposed.
Bye for now.